Hey there, I'm a rat, and today I'm going to explain the glory of masochism in the form of a Runescape 3 challenge. Taskman. A lot of you might have heard of this game mode. The gist of it is there's a website that'll generate specific tasks for you and track your progress, with the goal of eventually completing everything RuneScape has to offer. Albeit, that's a lot easier said than done. There are people who've been playing this mode for years, and still, nobody's finished it. In fact, the player at the top of the leaderboard isn't even in the final tier of progress yet. Okay, so that's all well and good. But you're probably here because you've heard of the mode, tried playing it yourself, but as soon as you went on the website and looked at the rules page, you closed all your tabs and went back to maxing necromancy. Yeah, 5,000 words of rules is daunting for anyone, but that's why I'm here to explain it to you. Most of the rules aren't actually rules, but exceptions written to account for anything that might happen while you play, since the tasks are all chosen randomly. So I'm going to go down the list of all the rules and try to go in depth through each one as best I can. There's going to be timestamps for each section so you can easily find any part you're looking for. If at the end of it you feel like anything I said was unclear, or you still don't understand, I'm going to leave a link to the Taskman Discord in the description, since there's an entire section dedicated to helping not only new players, but anyone who has any questions. Just before continuing, I want to give a huge thanks to the Taskman Discord and team for helping out with this video, and a special thanks to Sir Blinky for helping me iron out all the details. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So, to get started, you go on the website, taskman.rs, click on register, put in the RuneScape name of the character you're playing as. So, yes, you will need to have created a character before going on the website. Small little note here, most Taskman players like doing a little tradition of naming their Taskman characters with the words Task or Taskman in it. It's just a little nod since it's not an official game mode, and helps people realize you're playing Taskman. So the names would be something like Task Blinky, Taskman Mew, Rat Tasks, Taskman versus Taskmain. Taskman versus Taskmain is actually a very easy distinction to make. Taskmans are fresh accounts that were made specifically to play the Taskman mode. Taskmains are just everything else. Are you an Iron Man player who isn't a fresh account playing it? Taskmain. Are you a non-Iron Man player who's fresh playing it? Taskmain. Are you not following the rules exactly? Taskmain. Only an official Taskman will appear on the leaderboards though, no Taskmains, since they need to stick to the rules and everything like that. But a Taskmain can do whatever they want, whenever they want to, so it provides a lot more freedom, and some people do really enjoy that. The tasks are just there to help you have something to focus on. Active tasks. The active task is whatever you rolled into, and there's a few rules associated with them which can get a bit confusing, so stick with me. You're not allowed to work towards other activities if you can avoid it, but specific rules later on will allow you to do so. Avoid gaining XP in skills unless it's absolutely necessary to progress the task. Necessary or unavoidable XP is when you're required to do an activity where you can't avoid gaining XP. So like having to catch bass to obtain the big bass. Don't go out of your way to obtain items other than those that benefit your active task. You still need to avoid XP in active tasks, but you're allowed to do things like buying items from shops. You're allowed to go back to previously completed tiers if or when new tasks are added. You're allowed to buy skill mastery capes and mark their tasks as complete as soon as you achieve level 99 or 120 in a skill. Utilizing boosting services
CSGO boost
through any means is not allowed. So paid boosting and leeching is completely prohibited. However, group content is obviously allowed to be done with other players, and the rules for this will be mentioned in the PVM section. Methods and activities. This refers to the methods and activities used to work on the active task. So you must use methods that you have access to, or get to the minimum required level to complete the task, unless another rule allows you to go further. So for example, Slayer rules, which will allow you to level high enough to access any unique that your task requires you to get. A task will never expect you to go to a higher level than the soft cap for that tier. Now, before continuing, let's go over what soft caps are in a bit more detail. Soft caps are a basic set of level caps used to give players an idea of what level range their skills should be in for any given tier. What this means is that a certain tier will never make you level past its soft cap. For example, for the regular skills, you will not need to level past 30 to finish the beginner tier. Or if we look at combat skills, excluding summoner and prayer, you won't need to level past 90 to finish the medium tier. One important distinction to make for this is that just because you hit a soft cap doesn't mean you need to stop using that skill. In no way is that expected of you. If you hit the soft cap and naturally level past it, that's completely fine and is actually expected of you. You're allowed to use any method granting only experience in your current task related skill that doesn't work on other tasks, unless the task mentions a specific method to be used in the description. Methods or activities which have tasks requiring you to obtain uniques from them must be avoided. This basically just means that if you want to kill something that has a unique drop that isn't a pet item on the general section of the Slayer log, or has a base drop rate of 1 out of 2,000 or rarer, you can't. Items that are required for supply tasks may be created if creating them benefits your active task. A supply task is a task made specifically for Taskmen, intended to smooth the curve for some skills or to grant useful consumables. One thing to keep in mind with these tasks is if you already have enough of the required item and the required levels for the supply task, you can just complete it immediately. Activities which would complete area task subtasks don't need to be avoided, since a lot of the time these are quite random. Special currencies and reputations can be used off task as long as it is spent on previously obtained or non-task items. They can also be saved for later tasks that will need them. An important thing to note with this is that you don't need to avoid Menopause reputation. Bonus experience given from Fort Forthy or from items such as Agroth Pearls can be put on any skill to be utilized whenever the skill is used in your Taskman journey. Equipment or consumables that give XP buffs such as skilling outfits can be used at any point as long as the total benefit isn't higher than 10%. For example, the full fishing outfit gives 5% bonus fishing XP, so this is allowed to be worn when fishing even if you don't need the XP. However, brawling gloves give a 50% bonus in a specific skill, so they can only be used when experience is required in that skill. Lastly, Nastroth,
look at the top of his head!
And any use of skill resets are strictly prohibited. So the general takeaway from this section is that you can use any option available for your task unless it's explicitly forbidden or it involves gaining XP in an unrelated skill. Combat. In Taskman, the combat skills are attack, strength, ranged, magic, constitution, defense, and necromancy. During activities in which you're required to use combat, you can use any of the skills, even ones that are past their soft cap, as well as train your preferred combat style up to level 30 if you fail to kill relevant monsters or quest bosses for your active task. One thing to keep in mind is that necromancy is locked behind an active task in the beginner tier, so you'll have to wait to complete that before you're able to train it. You may also use combat assisting tools like Bone Crusher, Seedicide, Herbicide, and the like. Progress between tiers. So there are 8 total tiers in Taskman, those being beginner, easy, medium, hard, elite, master, legendary, and god. Once you've completed all the possible active tasks from your tier, you're able to move on to the next. However, progress is halted before you complete a number of passive tasks. For example, to get from beginner to easy, 25 passive tasks must be completed. In hard tier and onward, there's also going to be group PVM unique tasks that need to be completed before you can progress to the next tier. So let's go over passive tasks now. Passive tasks are tasks that generally can't be worked on actively. This includes things that are inherently time-gated, like arc birds, the entirety of the farming skill, or activities that are only available during certain days of the week, as well as assembly passives, which will require you to get items that are gained over multiple tasks. This is done to allow them to be made well before the absolute last possible task to get their ingredient. Some of the rules for passive tasks are that you can't work on passive tasks that award EXP or complete quests which are not required for your active task. You can work on any minigame or distraction and diversion that awards solely combat XP or no XP at all. You're allowed to assemble any items you've obtained the necessary skill levels, components, or materials for. Group PVM. So for this section, it's not really super important if you don't understand it, since group encounters only really come into play at hard tier, and by the time you're at that level of progress, you'll probably have a very good understanding of it anyway. So let's just start by describing what a group PVM encounter is. An encounter is defined as a group encounter when the boss has no achievements saying it can be completed in a solo instance. The boss can be faced in a group, but the loot is distributed individually, or the boss has an enrage mechanic that resets daily. So looking at you, Araxor, fucking spider.
The giant enemy spider.
Let's go over the placeholder term now, since it pops up here and there and it can be a bit confusing. Placeholder is a Taskman term that was made so that if your task requires you to do group encounters but you're unable to find the team, you can mark the task as placeholder in the drop-down list, mark it as complete, and actually complete it when you're able to find a group. There's a lot of other rules related to group PVM, but there isn't really a point in trying to explain them all here since it's quite complicated, and by the time you reach hard tier, like I mentioned before, you're probably going to have a good understanding of how it works anyway. Timegate. So I'm going to take this opportunity to explain time gating as well. So tasks are considered time gated when they need real life time to pass before you can proceed. If this happens, you're allowed to mark the task as completed and move on to the next one, as long as you do as much as possible to complete the task first and you make sure to return to it to finish it as soon as possible. So for example, if your task requires you to grow a kitten into a cat before finishing, you can move on to the next task while you wait for it to grow, and as soon as it's grown, you come back and finish the original task. Item acquisition. You're allowed to obtain items for your active task if your task specifically states where or how to obtain the item, or if it's in stock in a store and you have access to it. If the item cannot be obtained in any of these ways, you can choose to level up skills if the required item can be obtained within your tier soft cap. Keep in mind, if the obvious route for obtaining your item is above your soft cap or unavailable, there is most likely another way to get it. And a great way to find out is actually to send a message to the clan or to the Discord server. A good example of this is needing gold in beginner tier. If you need gold, you can go to Varrock East Bank, or is it West Bank? You can go to Varrock Bank some fucking where, use telekinetic grab, and fucking yoink one of the gold bars. Hope you're happy, Elroy. Now you can stop telling me it's in the video. Stop mentioning it. Consumables and tools. When your activities could benefit from a consumable or tool you don't currently have, you're allowed to create them, as long as you have the materials already banked and there's no active task that requires their creation. XP doesn't matter here. If you really need something, it can be made, so long as it's a consumable. So for example, runes, ammo, food, potions. You're also allowed to create only the minimum number you estimate the activity to require. So basically, no stockpiling. You're also allowed to repurchase or recreate items that you previously required or obtained as long as they benefit your current task. So for example, replacing degraded tier 90 armor. As for items from minigames and D&D reward shops, as long as you have the relevant currency, you can purchase any items that have no active tasks. However, if those items have tasks tied to them, you cannot sell them after the task is complete. As for special boss collection log drops, if your task includes an item that is only registered in the log when it's picked up or read, you have to pick it up when it drops. If you forget, you have to mark it as obtained for the task anyway. Wilderness flash events. Wilderness flash events are events that occur every hour in game, and associated tasks are marked as placeholder. What this means is basically these tasks cannot be reasonably completed immediately, but it doesn't really make sense to mark them in the passive tasks. Placeholder tasks are almost exclusively wilderness flash events or group PVM tasks. For example, the Wilderness Sack of Wilds rewards task can only be completed once every few hours or every hour depending. And group PVM tasks are dependent on one or more players being available to fight the boss. If you have a placeholder Sack of Wild rewards task, you may participate in all Wilderness Flash events until your task is complete. If you have a placeholder Sack of Very Wild rewards task, you may participate in all stages of all 3 of the special events. Otherwise, you can normally participate in all Flash events. You may also open the Sack of Wild or Very Wild if it is your current placeholder task or if you've completed all associated tasks. You can participate in any Combat Wilderness Flash event as long as the EXP lamp is discarded at the end of the stage, since they don't award any combat EXP otherwise. The only exception to this is the King Black Dragon Rampage special event, since you need to have obtained the Last Rider's book or have the active task for a King Black Dragon drop. You can ignore the Last Rider's book, by the way, if you have a placeholder for Very Wild sacks. For multiple stage flash events, you're only able to participate in the individual stages that you need. Otherwise, you should wait outside of the events zone for the stages that you can't do, so that your total needed contribution doesn't increase and you don't impact other players negatively. When you have to take part in flash events, you have to stay until success is guaranteed. For combat events, you need to stay until completion, and for skilling events, you can leave once the total group contribution has reached and the 30-second event countdown has begun. If you leave early, it's considered leeching, and you might have your spine ripped out and demoted to Taskmain. This is real, and I've seen Blinky do it to 6 people. Please send help. Please, God, send help. I haven't seen the sun in... Quests and experience rewards. You can only start quests or mini quests when it's strictly required for your active task. While doing quests, you're allowed to finish any quests that your task made you start, as well as use any lamps or one-time XP rewards you get from them. One thing to keep in mind is that each subquest of a special quest is its own quest. For example, Recipe for Disaster, Dimension of Disaster, is separate from Recipe for Disaster, Freeing Evil Dave. Clue scrolls. Can feel my skin crawling just saying the word. So when your active task requires you to obtain treasure trail uniques, you're allowed to train skills up to the soft cap if it allows you to complete the steps or complete quests and obtain items that are required for the clue step. However, you are not allowed to reroll any of the loot if a master clue is part of the loot, and you're not allowed to downgrade master clues into other tiers of clue either. For easy clues, if you need flowers for them, you're allowed to complete the waterfall quest. If the 40 mithril seeds are insufficient for the color of flower you need, then get fucked until you get to medium tier. Master clues. So master clues are a bit of a massive pain. So if your master clue is an emote step and you're missing an item that's obtained from another task completing activity, you get one shot at the item each time you roll the step. You can do the other task completing activity until you've received one unique from it. Downgrade or reroll the clue if you don't get the item you're looking for. If an item would fill both a player-owned house slot and a hidey hole, but you're not in possession of a second one, you get one shot for the duplicate. When you run out of master clues during a master clue unique task, you can complete the collection urns of the Empire or the green Gobbo Goodies one for Tetracrumpus pieces, which can be repaired and opened for clues. What I prefer to do is put a gun to my fucking head and pull the trigger. Alright, so I'm really quickly just going to explain unlocks to get it out of the way. So unlocks are tied to the completion of some tasks, and they're there to smooth the Taskman experience. They're not in the game to prevent activities or methods, but they're actually there so that when you finish it, it unlocks something that would otherwise be restricted by the rule. They're still subject to all the rules, and the action or activity specifically mentioned within the unlock is exempt. So, for example, let's take cooking. You are now allowed to cook 20 cooked crayfish when you run out of food. This is there so that you're able to get food outside of the normal restrictions to play the game, and you don't have to be bound by the rules. All the unlocks are in place to achieve a specific goal and often have an expiration or limitation in the form of a period of time or number of actions. So if we go back to the example, you're only allowed to stock up on 20 cooked crayfish. Now it's time for the longest part of this video, skills. So a lot of skills have some specifics for how they work, and the ones that work normally just to get them out of the way, so this means no special anything, they're just based on every other rule before, only use them when you need the XP and stuff like that, is woodcutting, thieving, mining, and divination. The others have at least a small exception to them, and I'm gonna go over each skill now. Agility. You're allowed to use shortcuts and segments of agility courses if they allow you to get to your point of interest faster. Archaeology. When working on archaeology tasks that don't require XP or chronotes, you should aim to reduce your XP as much as possible, including prioritizing excavating and restoring low-level artifacts from scratch over higher-level items. You're allowed to excavate and restore any artifact that your task specifically asks for, and any from the Venator Remains excavation hotspot to further your Discoverer and Restorer achievements. When you need XP, you can work on any mysteries, researches, and collections, though you can't hand in relics to the monolith, as those are all specific tasks. Construction. When you need construction XP, you can turn any type of log that you already have in your possession, and if you don't, you can chop any log that you're able to process. Fire making. This is the exact same thing as construction. When you need the XP, anything you have in your possession. Nothing in your possession, cut down whatever you can burn. Fletching. This is also the exact same. Thanks guys for making this 3 different sections on the rule page. Cooking. When you need cooking XP, you can cook any food item that you have access to that only awards cooking XP. So for example, you can't fish for them, but you're allowed to fish for raw fish if you're out of appropriate cookable food items. The bait and switch archaeology relic can also be used for this. Crafting. When you need crafting XP, you can mine and cut gems from gem rocks despite receiving mining XP, and you can play and repair the harps in the Ithel district of Prifdinus despite receiving construction XP from it, because that's an early game thing that isn't locked behind the worst quest series in the game. Crystal keys and crystal triskelions. What the fuck is this word? Crystal keys and crystal triskelions may be assembled whenever. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, I'm still in beginner tier. Now you know. Dungeoneering. Definitely the least outdated skill of them all. When you're training Dungeoneering, you can open as many doors as possible regardless of XP received on other skills, gather and process items that would immediately speed up your Dungeoneering training or are otherwise required for completing your dungeon/task, only group with Taskmen in the same tier or players whose Dungeoneering levels correspond to your own. However, Taskmen in medium tier and higher can actually group with anyone. This is more of a rule just to make sure that early game players aren't hyper boosting in Dungeoneering. You can also collect any journal entries, Fremeric saga items, or Elven unreadable pages you find. When you need Dungeoneering tokens, you can use the Daemonheim and Elite dungeons. You can also group for Elite dungeons with other players in your tier, or if your gear, herblore, prayer, and summoning benefits are within 5 levels of each other. You can also use lucky charms in elite dungeons as long as the uniques you have left have a drop rate of 1 out of 2,000 or rarer. Farming. So, as mentioned previously, farming is a free skill that is basically 99% locked behind just passive tasks. The only active task is going to be the tutorial for player-owned farms, as the pens and the farms have their own active tasks. Once you've completed those tasks, in addition to be able to use the farms, you can buy the deeds to any of the pens to unlock any associated animal, and use any animal as soon as you obtain them. One thing of note is that the player-owned farm and ranch out of time animals are considered pet items, so when you're deciding for a method for your active tasks, you're allowed to grind these out. Farming is a free skill. If something solely awards farming XP, you can do it. Trapper is a fucking scam, but animals he gives you do count for tasks, so you can utilize him. Fishing. So fish can be caught when your active task requires cooking or fishing XP, or if you're out of relevant food for PVM. Your cooking unlock will determine what you're allowed to fish. Herblore. When you need Herblore XP, or you're making potions according to an unlock, you can kill any monster for seeds, herbs, and secondary ingredients. You can also obtain, craft, and create secondaries whenever you need. You're also allowed to clean herbs whenever it would benefit your current task. Hunter. When you need Hunter XP or Hunter marks, you can use activities that award additional off-skill XP, like Big Game Hunter, Charming Moths, or Barehanded Catching Butterflies, to name a few. Magic. You can cast any spell when it would be beneficial to your current task. Necromancy. When doing Necromancy, you can kill monsters for their bones to get better outputs. One thing to keep in mind while doing rituals is that you can only clear disturbances that appear while your active task requires you to perform rituals or to gain necromancy XP. Prayer. You can use bones and ashes for prayer XP whenever you see fit, however you see fit, and you can hand in the daily challenges for prayer as well. Rune crafting. If your active task needs runes and regular currency shops are out of stock or don't sell them, you can rune craft them, assuming you already have the level and essence to do it. If you're out of pure essence and your active task requires it, you can either loot Archmage Serador's chest after the rune memories quest has been completed, mine for pure essence, or kill monsters for it. Smithing. You're allowed to mine any ores necessary when your active task requires you to smith an item or obtain smithing XP. When smithing the Artisan's Workshop, you cannot complete ceremonial sword orders until your task is to obtain one, until full completion of the blacksmith's outfit. This doesn't include the helmet add-on, because orders have a 1 out of 100 or a 1 out of 25 if they're perfectly done chance to award you one of the pieces. Summoning. When your active task requires summoning XP, or you're creating pouches that benefit your activities, you can kill monsters to create pouches or gather tertiary ingredients. Invention. So, as you probably already know, invention is the only skill in the game that's locked behind other skills, those being crafting, smithing, and divination, which all need to be level 80 before it can be unlocked. Once it is unlocked, you can use the perked up gear, weapons, and tools without any restriction, as well as research, create, and use any invention item you have the levels and materials for, provided that no active tasks exist for the item. Also, you can only use the Furnace tool perk when your active task requires non-invention experience gain in the relevant tool skill. Another thing to note is that when training invention XP for another active task that requires it, you can research blueprints and level up augmented weapons and armor, as well as disassemble or siphon them. Now it's time to talk about the last and arguably most complicated skill, Slayer. So to start off, let's talk about Slayer log uniques. When you get a Slayer task, you're allowed to level up Slayer high enough to access any of the uniques in the dropdown. This is the only skill and task that will allow you to do this. If a drop has a Slayer skill icon next to it in the dropdown, then you're allowed to complete Slayer assignments to get it, since those drastically raise the drop chance. You must also complete any assignments that can complete your task, regardless of possible uniques, as well as kill any elite Slayer monster you spawned yourself. So now let's talk about viable assignments. When you're doing Slayer assignments to level up, obtain on assignment uniques, or you're working on a task that requires Slayer points, you can do assignments that award unique items found in the dropdown of your task. These need to be done. You also need to make sure that your Slayer assignments don't award unowned unique items, lore books, or pages. You're also allowed to do any assignments that have a boss version as long as you have an open group PVM placeholder for it. On top of this, you're also allowed to do special Slayer assignments. If any of the assignments don't meet the criteria that I just listed, they need to be skipped either by using the Slayer points or by speaking with Turiel and Spria. If you do end up using Turiel and Spria, then you're allowed to do any assignment that they assign you. Now onto the last thing, Reaper assignments. So you can only complete Reaper assignments when you've rolled into the medium tier unlock, and only for bosses that have unlocked the boss portal in War's Retreat 4. The kill also needs to contribute to your Reaper, so you can't use Death Touch darts since they award 0 points. Reaper assignments can also only be done for bosses that require keys if you already own the amount of keys required to finish the Reaper, and if it awards you Reaper points. They can only be done for bosses that require keys if you already own the amount of keys required to finish your Reaper, and if it awards you with Reaper points. On top of that, it can only be done for bosses that appear in your current or previous tiers. Well, that was a fucking lot of information. Like, way too much of it. But hey, congrats on getting this far into the video. To conclude everything, I'd like to say that in the 3 months that I've been playing Taskman, it's been one of the most fun and excruciatingly painful experiences in my life. And if it wasn't for the amazing community behind it, I most likely would have lost my mind after my first task. If you like challenges, want a better direction for your RuneScape experience, or you just want to torture yourself, I really strongly suggest you join the Taskman Discord linked in the description and give it a try yourself. Anyways, that's it for me. If you like the video, please consider supporting me by liking and subscribing. This was my first ever video, so I'd love to hear the feedback in the comments, or you can join my Discord and send it there. You can also come join me on live streams as well. I stream every weekday at 11 AM EST or 4 PM GMT. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching, and I'll catch you next time.